Welcome to the Jesus People segment of the Antioch Indy podcast, a place where each week we're going to hear from different people about what it means to walk with God. We hope that you leave encouraged and equipped and that this builds your faith for what God wants to do in your life. Hello, everybody. This is Karis Freegee, and I have Steve and Linda Znachko on today, so I have two better halves. I know, that's great.
First time together.
I have had you both on separately, and now here we are. This is the final message that we're going to do on money. Mm-hmm. I enjoyed the series much more than I even anticipated enjoying it.
I knew that. It was not a series you were looking forward to, was it?
I just am always like, oh, money, that's so not spiritual.
Yeah, exactly.
Which brings us to this week's message that felt the practical using of money.
Right.
And so I kind of wanted to have you guys on to just talk about your story with money. I think we had the Bryans on a couple weeks ago, right after we talked about tithe, but they were more talking about the generosity of God toward them and gifting them a car.
Yeah, that was such a great message.
Yeah, and if you know them, they're radical givers. So it's
Absolutely.
like, this makes sense that the Lord's going to make sure you are taken care of.
And then Bill's again was on God's being so faithful.
Right, in the middle of, and realizing that finances, like that money is just ashes in your mouth without Jesus. You know, I feel like that's his testimony and his story is the presence of the Lord being sufficient. Yeah. And so when I think of people who are generous, who are faithful in their finances, and who aren't afraid of the gift, like it's like sometimes in my mind I'm like, well, I'd rather just not have money to not feel like it would like jeopardize my soul. Yes. And I think the Lord would have us just be faithful with what we've been given. So I would love to hear some personal testimony, some practical things that you found, you know, as most of us are in this series of like this stage of life of accumulating and like, what do you do? How do we be faithful? How do we have families? How do we take care of our families' needs? How do we not love money? You know?
Yeah. I also think, you bring up the point about like not having the responsibility because the weight of it is so great. Yeah. And as we've done so much marriage counseling, the weight of also in a marriage, like most people say we fight about money a lot. Yeah. And I think you make a good point about, without God, we will fight about money. Right. And there needs to be provision in our marriages for space to say we can't strive to give, spend, save, invest, anything without God speaking into that. Yeah. So if couples are fighting about it a lot, I'd say, are you sure you're praying enough about it first and bringing God into it or seeking counsel about it? Because it doesn't need to be like that. Yeah. To me, I feel like looking back at the message, the point that stuck out to me the most that Chad and I actually had dialogue about was when he was talking about the money he uses. That's the title of the message, right? It was the money I use. Yes. Yeah. But as he was sharing, I don't pay my bills. Exactly. I make this. I leverage this money. That. Yeah. So good. Yeah. And Chad and I went home, and it was just a good moment of like, do we feel that way, or do we feel at the mercy of this bill or this expense and the grocery? Like, are we like feeling out of control, or do we feel like, God, you've given us enough? Help us be mindful. Yeah. To be aware of what we're giving, and the longevity of it. Then.
I loved that point in that thought process to turn. And I think we have to acknowledge that the reason we fight about it so much is that money is the world's God. And we have to acknowledge that. And because it makes, and I loved one of my favorite lines in the series was Andrew said, money makes a lot of promises that only God can keep. Yeah. And I think we have to realize is that money's not an easy topic to overdo because it promises prestige, it promises power, it promises presence, comfort, pleasure, all these things that only God can give. And money promises all of those things. Right. And so I think we need to give ourselves permission. I do know some people that actually don't struggle with it. I know most people really, really do. Yeah. And I think it's okay because Jesus said it'll be the worries of the world, deceitfulness of riches, and desires for other things that will choke me out. Yeah. So I feel really free to really struggle with this and say, okay, God, this is a big one for me. And it was huge for me.
Well, you talk about that. I think it's interesting you brought up that verse, the deceitfulness of riches, especially because the verse he used, which was Proverbs
23, 4 and 5.
23, 4 and 5. When I hear that verse, I'm like, that's Steve Znachko's verse. Which, will you share what that verse is and then how you feel like money is deceitful?
Yeah. It for me, there's no question, and much more so than Linda, I was captured by money. I don't think you would have looked at me on the outside and looked and said, oh gosh, that guy's a money grubber. That guy's But on the inside, I was captured. And I wasn't captured by spending. Yeah. I was captured by savings. Yeah. And so that felt a lot more holy.
Right. No, even hearing you say that, I'm like, oh, that's not that bad.
But God really got to me and just said, your God is your savings account.
Yes.
And the security of it. And the statement that came to me was, you're trying to save me out of your life.
Wow.
Which was true. I thought, if I have enough money in my savings account, then I can protect against this, this, and this. And even, quite frankly, if you say you want me to go here and here, and you change my job to do it, I got enough to say, I'm not going.
Yeah. And
I hated to admit that. But so I was absolutely a slave to money. It held me captive. It was my master. And so that verse just captured my journey of being able to say, okay, I can get there by the money route. And I think one of the things that we struggle with is that in the back of our minds, we picture God saying, hey, there's two routes in order to get comfortable and content and free and pleasure and all that you need. There's two routes. One's money and one's me. And I want you to choose me.
Right.
Instead of him looking and going, oh, my child, that cannot deliver what its promises. Yes. I am not threatened by money. I am not afraid of money. I am not jealous of money. It is the biggest liar on the face of the earth.
That's so good. Isn't the verse, the Proverbs 23 says, do not set your heart on riches?
Yes. And cease from consideration of it. Stop chasing after it.
Because as soon as
you're, and that, honestly, Linda watched and suffered through my story because I had us captured. Because even though I started a business, it was really, really tough. So I was captured in one kind of fear. Then as I started to make money, I was captured by a different kind of fear. Yeah. And so I couldn't spend, I couldn't enjoy, and I couldn't give freely in any of that because I was afraid all the time. And so I just want to tell you just a really short story of just that. So I go after things pretty heavy, and I'm just like, wait a minute, I got to find out the truth. And I just wanted to say, through my life, there were, and I believe so many people have done this. They've said, I'm only this far away.
Right.
And I reached that thing 4 different times, and it never satisfied.
Like a monetary amount. You're like, I'm this much away from. I set
actual dollars that said, there's no way I'll need more if I hit this. 4 times hit it, 4 times it wasn't enough.
And he would even say, I'll afford myself the luxury of XYZ if I ever get a bonus, whatever size. Yeah. And then I would see him get that bonus and then not be able to give himself what he said he would. If we get there, then we can have this or go there. And I thought, there's no freedom on either side of this for him.
There wasn't, and it really, just a snapshot of the day I got set free was that actually business started to be very successful, still couldn't get there. We went to a financial planner, and we had, at a very young age, a lot to put away. It now got to work for us for a very long period of time. We lived a very modest lifestyle, like I said, because I couldn't spend. And so everything on the formula basis was great. So I gave them, and they said, come on back in 2 weeks. We'll give you your financial plan. I came back, they came a binder like this big, and what they told me I still needed made me so mad.
Wow.
And I literally said in the meeting, and Linda was sitting there in tears because she's thinking, as tight as it's been now, wait till we leave this meeting. And I literally said in anger to them, I said, then you just got done telling me how well we're doing at a very young age. What does the rest of the world do? Right. And I slammed the book down and I said, and by the way, if you change the inflation rate by 0.5%, this whole thing goes away. And they go, that's right. And I said to Linda, I said, I need to go pray for 2 hours. Yeah. And I went to Cool Creek up in Carmel, and I came back and I said, we're not doing this anymore. Yeah. I'll never get there. And so it was, I just want to testify. I tried it every way possible, and it is a liar. And I've told you before, I have preached on it, I have taught on it, and if I could say anything to the people listening is, every time I talk about it, every time I preach about it, I see the eyes in the crowd that just say, that's not me. Yeah. I'm just this far away. Right. And I just want to say, you'll always be this far away. And when you reach it, you'll be happy for a couple of months, and then you go, oh, I set it too low. Yeah. And you get back on it. And if we come to the realization that it is us, it'll it'll just settle a lot faster.
So interesting.
Yeah.
And that also makes me think about the principle of, who you surround yourself with. If we are not around people in our friend group, in our life group, or just in ministry that live diverse lives, we are going to, if we're always around people who have more than us, we will absolutely never be content. And that pulls at us. And it's just so much temptation in that, a spirit of comparison and competition. And I really feel like one of the things that helped for us dissipate our fear of saving or spending or whatever was to be around just a lot of people who lived really differently than us.
Yeah.
And it really cultivated a spirit of gratitude in us. And then we're talking about those things, like Steve just had that phrase of like, how do other people do it? When we're putting all our kids in braces or whatever and thinking, how do some families do this when, and it just cultivated a spirit of, wow, we feel so blessed and we're so thankful that we don't have to think about this. So that's another principle that is really, I think, very practical to have people say, like, if you're struggling, make sure you're around people that live differently and have it differently than you.
Right. Because here's what we do, and this is something that we realized, is that if you took my second house and put it in the neighborhood that we owned our first house, we would walk out every day and say, look how blessed we are. I mean, this is almost like, this is incredible. We'd be grateful. This is a little embarrassing. I mean, look at us. We are, and we'd be filled with gratitude, but we don't. We take a second house and put it in a neighborhood that has houses at least equal and maybe a little bit better so that we can walk out and look and go, we're not doing all that great. Look at,
we don't have as much as our next door neighbor.
And then we do a third, and I just think identifying that we looked and said, we always tend to look at the people that are doing better than us. And we started looking at the zillions of people that were making it on far less, and it just gave us peace to be able to say that's more truth, because we just weren't looking at a true paradigm.
Right, for sure.
Yeah.
It is like so the lie, the hook of the enemy. And I feel like that temptation comes not with people that have a lot more than me, but more the person who has just a little more.
That's a
great
point.
It's like, like you get around someone with a lot more, you're like, oh, that's them. But if it's just like a little more, you're like, that would be nice too.
That would be nice. And that would make a big difference.
Right.
And I just think it's good to admit that and be able to say, and just surround yourself with some people. Because if we run with other in the crowd that keeps going, it does make us come back and go, well, maybe just a little bit more. So it's just a choice.
Well, I think the other difficult thing about this, we talked about this in our life group, was that, we're not sitting in our small groups or at dinner with our friends and all pulling out our checkbooks and talking about our spending. So the principle and mandate of tithing or just the value of giving among the church, it's all there, but we really don't talk about the nuts and bolts of what you're doing.
Yeah.
But I think as just a woman, I think the practical part of like, where do I can't compare how someone might be giving to an organization or what they're tithing, because I don't know what they're tithing. But when we see what people have, we assume a lot. But for me too, realizing like, so what am I going to do to discipline myself in just my day-to-day spending?
Yeah.
If I'm out shopping with friends or someone recently asked me just like, what are some of the principles I use to discipline myself in just that everyday spending?
Yeah.
And I thought, that I could see, I know what she's wrestling with. And she's like, I'm around a lot of people who just shop a lot. And I'm like, that is really a very common pastime. And it's a pleasure we afford ourselves as women. And so how do we do that? And, I realized even at this stage of my life, one of the principles I have is that I just shop a few times a year. And I kind of go all out, shop, and then when I come home, however many items I've bought, I take that many items out of my closet.
Wow.
So that my closet just doesn't get stuffed with accumulation. I want to feel like I'm moving things in and out of there, and even buying like several dresses so that when a wedding comes up or something comes up, I'm not out shopping again. And that has really helped me be disciplined, and I'm really grateful for that. But I think the principle, like having prepared plans in place for spending and like even the day-to-day or month-to-month spending is helpful to forward think some of those things and say like, no, these are my values and this is how I'm going to at least attempt to plan for this so that I'm not prone to just go out and meander and spend aimlessly, where you can't keep track of that kind of spending.
Yeah, that's really good. I was going to ask you, because of the sermon title, the money you use.
Right, that's what I was thinking, how practical.
Yeah, like, and even with as a homemaker in your home, what were like tricks you found? Like, that's for clothing. Like, what about the house? You guys told me a little bit about decisions you made early on. Can you share some of that?
Yeah, I mean, we really felt like when we moved into our home, we just were forced with the question of, there's things we want different furniture to fill this space, or our kids are a different age, so what do we feel like we need, and how are we going to budget the conversation and the spending? And we realized, like, wow, we can actually afford to just kind of like decorate our house and get it all done now. And we realized, really, for me, the truth is, like, when I'm done, I'll just start over.
Yes.
So, I thought, so how do we guard against it being just something we're always doing? Because there's the financial drain of it, but there's also, it takes a ton of time.
Yes.
And I don't want to be always shopping for the next thing. So we just decided to do one room at a time, because we realized really what's going to happen is by the time we get done, we'll just start over.
Exactly, yeah.
And the cycle never stops.
It gave us so much peace and enjoyment of doing it. That way we just didn't have the constant decisions, and we really just enjoyed it, and it really changed our pace way differently than our house previously, of feeling like, it's not going to be done until we're done. And we had to be settled. There were a lot of rooms that weren't done.
Yeah.
And that's where comparison comes in, because you walk into friends' houses that are just done to the nines, and you just look and go, we're not there.
Yeah.
And you go home and you have that discussion again, and you go, but we could. I know, but what's the truth?
Yeah.
What's for us, right? Yeah.
What's the reality?
And I think part of it, don't you think, like HGTV has let us into people's houses and Pinterest and Instagram and social media in a way that nothing ever has.
No, I did not live. I have to say, I did not live in that.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been in our home now 23 or whatever years, but when we lived in our house before that, we built that home, and it was just had nothing. Like, there wasn't paint on the walls.
Yeah.
We had to choose absolutely everything. And I remember how we decided, even with that house, like, well, when Steve gets maybe a quarterly bonus, we'll decide on amount, and then that is what we'll choose to spend on whatever next project. And then Steve would say, well, what do you mean you're going to buy that XYZ thing? Like, and I'd say, if this is our budget and this is what we've decided on, then I want the freedom inside that budget to do whatever I want to do. If I want to spend this all on one thing, then I want you just to be like, okay.
Yeah.
If I want to spend it on 100 things, but still stay within the budget, I need to have fun in Disneyland with this, because I love the creative expression of it. But I honestly don't know how your generation does it with the pressure you guys are under with all of that, because I just didn't have that just like always just in my face.
Yeah. I mean, I think
felt the pressure enough,
Yeah, and it's the daily choice, like you're saying, of contentment, of like,
totally.
We are so thankful to have a home. It's a lifelong journey in our home. And like you said, like in 5 years, the tile you put in your kitchen now will be outdated. And I feel like even faster than that, because of the rate that we're seeing new things and dreaming new things. And so I think making like what you're saying is just so wise, like just making the slow but steady, purpose-filled steps of like, we're going to enjoy.
And then that allows, I had a young guy from our church ask such a great, honest question. I loved the honesty of this question. He just came up and he goes, I listened to you talk, and I get it, and I believe you, but look at you. Look at where you're at. And I thought, that's a great, honest question, because I know a lot of people are looking and going, I know, but if I had as much as you, I'd be generous too.
Yeah.
And I think, what a great, honest question.
Right.
And I said, okay, so then there's two things you need to know. Is one, you're assuming that I have enough. And I said, and I need you to know that just like I've just testified, financial people still tell me I don't have enough.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're looking at me and going, you're kind of in that realm of just going, if I had what you had, I'd have enough. I just need to tell you, no, you're still going to have people whispering in your ear that you don't have enough.
Yeah.
And I said, and second, you're thinking or actually wondering whether or not we waited until this time until we started to be generous. And the truth is we started to be generous 30 years ago.
It's so good.
And so my encouragement is, I don't care what the figure is. That day after Coal Creek, I walked home and I said, we are no longer going to be captured. We are going to both spend and we are going to give.
Yes.
with freedom and joy, and it changed our lives. Now, in the reality of things, it started us on a journey of setting money aside so that we gave more. We also did spend more. Yeah. And it was no longer our master. And so, but if we don't, we have to start. Another lie that tells you is just to be able to say, next year you can start to be generous. Yeah. And I'm telling you, next year will never come. And one of the best moves we made in our lives was to say, today we're going to start giving. Yeah. And that changed our lives. More than anything else is to be able to say, we're not going to wait until we retire, until somebody says we have enough to start being generous. We're going to start being generous now. So I would say, enjoy the generosity now, because we now, 25 years later, we actually set an end to our lifestyle. And we had the privilege of going back then and reviewing and saying, okay, what had been done in that 25 years? And I can tell you honestly, it was one of the most earth-shattering times in our lives, because one, we had to do a review because of some financial stuff. How much had we given away? And when we looked at that number, it freaked us out. Yeah. And we both said, I actually left the office and I drove home to Lynn and I said, here's what has happened. I said, let me ask you a question. 25 years ago, if God had said, hey, when you make this decision, you're going to give this amount away, would you have done it? And we said, no.
Isn't that scary?
Yeah, we would have said no to God.
We would have.
Then, next question, which was so earth-shattering, I said, okay, now, if God put this money back in our account today, how would it change our lives? And we couldn't come up with one thing.
It's really good.
That we felt. And then the third was even more. This led us to tears. We recounted all the things we would have missed. Yeah. If we hadn't been, if we hadn't given, and it was almost like our life wouldn't have been worth living. And so I look and I go, the very thing we would have said no way to, we don't even miss, and it changed our lives. Yeah. And so that is just kind of the testimony to say, it's scary, and I guarantee you, I don't care at what level that happens, everybody will be at that same thing 20 years from now and say, I don't miss it, and look what would have happened if I didn't do it.
Yeah. And I love that. I think it's like perfectly tying into what he was sharing, that like you're using your money. It's not using you. It's not dominating you. You get to say like, I am purposefully in my heart. And I have love seasons with Chad and I where we're like, we're not going to eat out these weekends because we know we want to do something. Yes. And and like the thrill you get when you master it.
Exactly.
Like when I go into Target and only spend $20, I'm like, I just beat Target at its own game.
There you go. There you go. I do.
I feel in charge. Right. You go to Target too, Steve?
No, but I hate it when I feel like I lost to Satan. When I feel like he tricked me, I bought it. I bought it hook, line, and sinker. Yes. That really ticks me off.
Yeah. And I think it's like catalytic as a body if we can be people who aren't afraid to have money, first of all, but aren't in love with it, where it becomes that tool that Andrew was talking about to invest and to give us kingdom return.
Yeah. Yeah. And go ahead.
Well, I think with giving, there's the immediate giving of like you're saying, planning like in a short-term kind of way to give and plan, like someone needs something in time, and so you want to contribute to that, so you save or you put something aside. And the one thing I did not have vision for at all, but Steve did, was like this idea that when we decided 20 years ago to cap our income, and then everything over that just got put aside. And I didn't understand that principle because I thought, but we don't know where it's going, but it was like, no, we need to hold on to this, so when we know of a greater need, we're going to be able to meet it. Yeah. And instead of just being like looking at all the letters at the end of the year that come in the mail and thinking like, oh, here's all this year-end giving, let's just give to these things. It was like, oh no, we can give to these things because we set that money aside. And little did we know that when I heard about the news about a baby in a dumpster, and God was calling me, little did I know, to start a ministry, and then it became a nonprofit. And it's been 10 years of, really providing resources for under-resourced families who have tragic or accidental loss. I thought, I don't have to fundraise for that and spend any time on that because
you've been fundraising for it.
Yes. I mean,
how amazing.
And Steve had that vision, not for that exactly, but I look and think, 10 years I have been about the business of doing what God called me to do and not being frustrated, that I have to now like do the chore of fundraising, which I know some people have to do, and I watch how hard that is, and I'm thankful I've not had to do that, but that's all because he had that vision for it.
So cool.
And I think if we're prepared and we plan ahead, like we have a heart of generosity, God honors that and multiplies it in ways we could never imagine.
And it's the faith aspect. I think that's what I heard in that story, is like sometimes we're setting aside what we've purposed to set aside. But I like the idea that it's like you don't always know even why I'm like well, we have this, but if we're not saving in a way that you said at the beginning, where it's like an unhealthy fear thing, but it's more like a faith thing.
Right.
That feels like a total switch to me.
Yeah, and I have, on the other side of it, I have tragically seen people be mastered and fearful their entire lives, and that is tragic to me to watch. And I think we have to realize what we're up against. It is a liar. It is something God identified it. Jesus said it. And we have to look and say, yeah, this is the thing. Because the other part about it is money is the biggest testimony to the world.
Yeah.
And I don't care. There's a lot of things we can speak of. When people find out, they did an article just on some of the choices that we made in a book. When people find out that, they don't have an answer for that. They don't have an answer. Like when we talk about going on missions, they might have an answer for that. When we talk about taking care of that, but when we actually choose to give money that they don't understand, that is an unstoppable ramp to share Jesus with somebody, because it doesn't make sense in any other realm. So it's also a really, really strong testimony.
Yeah.
And I don't care at what level. It doesn't have to be wealthy. I'm saying anytime you make a choice to not give yourself something, not automatically do something, live below your lifestyle, anything like that, people look and go, I don't get it. Why are you doing that?
Right.
Yeah.
But I think it is all faith, and I think, we have not had all perfect results to our giving as being fruitful. We've bombed on some things, but I know that we can say that we gave in faith.
Yes.
And the results are really up to God.
Totally.
And some things look fruitful and some things do not. And some people seem like they were the right people to give to, and other people we look at and shake our heads and we're almost embarrassed that we contributed to something. But it's a fight in me to say, I know there's been a lot of people burned in their giving because things have failed, or people have failed them. And I think we have to help encourage people to give for the right reasons, but also realize like you're giving in faith that your heart's been moved for some reason, and God will honor that. Not so much in the results, because the results are up to God. And we can beat ourselves up for some of the things that we've seen happen and just think, oh goodness, we missed that. And then really stop and work through, no, we really gave that in faith, and we really were trying to believe in that person, and we were trying to make them great with what they were hoping to do. And it's not up to us to make sure that everyone we give to is living up ideally in character or to the mission that we agreed to in the first place.
Yeah, that's so great. I was reading, I think it was last night, even with Haven, our 4-year-old, we were reading devotional, and it had the God loves a cheerful giver verse. And as I was looking at that, I was just thinking, do I give cheerfully?
Yeah.
And just the challenge in my heart to have a cheerful giving, because we're partnering with him. And it makes me think of when Andrew, I think it was a couple weeks ago in the sermon, talked about the parable with the three guys who got talents.
Yeah, the talents.
And just how it's when you're faithful with what you've been given, you're entrusted with more.
Yeah.
And whether it's this side of heaven or the next side, that's what's so exciting. But wanting to be people who are faithful. And what I hear in y'all's story is you've invested well in the kingdom.
So you bring up a really good topic. We talked about this at Life Group, which seemed to be a good revelation. It's just that I shared and said, but I was not a cheerful giver when I started giving. Yeah. Okay, and so I think a lot of people are waiting to go, oh, God's going to change my heart. I'm like, no, I had to give.
Sure.
So God could change my heart. My first gift was I
really
gave
painful.
it, not just painful. My attitude was oh great, you want this? I'll give it to you. Watch what happens next. I won't have food for my family. I won't have a roof over my head. My kids will never get to go to school. I mean, literally, I was whining, and all of that, I could see the Father just looking and going, yeah, I know you feel that, and that's what I'm going to use, because I did give it, sure that it was going to lead to my demise. And then when it didn't, I looked and go, oh,
it almost teaches you the cheerful.
No, it does teach you. So then the next time he goes asks for a little more, and I'm like, I can't do that. And it's like he goes, whoa, remember you said that before?
Yeah.
And the smile comes maybe 7 gifts down the road when you look and say, hey, God, you can have it all. And then he looks at you and says, now you're free.
Yeah.
And now you got that smile on your face. But it took me 7 years to smile at giving, because I had to renew my mind that God was bigger than money. And so I couldn't wait until I felt like I was a joyful giver. Yeah. A part of it is understand God is saying, I know what has you. Rich young ruler.
Right.
I know what has you.
Right.
And if that rich young ruler would have let go of the money that day, he wouldn't have said, oh, joy, 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 here's my money.
Right.
He would have been giving it of just going, I don't know how this works. I don't know. The part of it is we have to realize that's what giving looks like at the start. I don't know how this works. It feels like I just gave away my future. It feels like I just gave away my pleasure and my comfort. It's going to feel that way.
Yeah.
And then you're going to realize you didn't.
Yeah.
And that's when you realize the heart of God has never been trying to take anything from you.
Yeah.
He's always been trying to set you free.
So good.
That's
it also reminds me, though, of you saying, you know, how many times you've gone to Ukraine and you've thought, it's the worst time in the world for me to leave my business and go to Ukraine for however many days, 2 weeks or whatever. And really the faith and trust it takes to say, I'm going to leave it all behind. And, you know, is God my master even at my work? And the freedom of saying, it will be here when I get back if the Lord is willing, you know. And you go and he sustains it. And the
which
provision
then sets
of
you
it.
free from work.
Right. Totally. And I think, again, we are talking about money in this series, but I can't help but go to the fact that the one resource Jesus never had was money, but he gave himself and he gave time. And if we valued giving our time, which is what Steve was, you know, doing in Ukraine, like I'm going to go give my time, and yet the provision will be there financially later if the Lord wants it to be there for us to continue giving and being a part of the kingdom the way we, you know, feel like he's asked us to be. So it's also entangled, but it's important for us to think of, I think, all of our resources and how are we cheerfully giving away our time as much as our money?
So good. Steve, will you just pray to close us and pray for people to be free to be users in a good way?
Lord, I thank you for my journey, and I thank you for your patience with me in my journey, because mine was well over a decade. And sometimes I'm still fighting it. So I thank you that you are patient and that you are good. I thank you, and I pray that you give us a revelation of your heart. I think I know a lot of us feel like sometimes you're trying to take something or put pressure on us, and that we would have this vision of a father trying to set us free. That we would look at you, and like you say in 1 Samuel, where you say, if you leave me, what you'll go to is futile, it destroys, and it cannot deliver. And so I pray, Lord, that we'll carry that promise every time you're asking us to give us and to be generous and to step into something. I pray that we won't wait until it feels great, but that we'll give it knowing that eventually we'll see more of you and we'll know more of you, and that will make us smile, and that will be great. So in all of our lives, in all that we have, at whatever level, because the truth is that there are many, many, many people that are way more generous than us, that are giving from areas of want and that areas of deep need, and they still challenge me and bless me when I watch them. But I pray, Lord, in each one of our journeys, that we will journey more towards you, more towards freedom, and more towards you being 100% our God, and that we will walk away from every other God, especially this God of money that lies, makes promises that only you can keep. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, guys. See you next week.